Well, welcome to Eastman's Journal Podcast edition. I'm your host, Ike Eastman. My special guest today was a Ranger in the Army. He is a Montana boy, and he's the executive director of Montana Outfitters and Guides Association. So we get into some of the nitty gritty, some of the things that are happening in Montana. We get into talking about the military, his military background. He's got a really interesting, he was talking above my head most of the time in as far as that goes, but he gives some advice. If you or somebody you know is thinking about the military, he gives some amazing advice on things that you should be thinking about and things that that person should know going into, as well as how important it is and why it's important that we still have that. He also has a really good response to "thanks for your service." You'll have to check that out. And we talk about the number of hunters increase in Montana, and what it's affecting, how it's affecting public land, private land, and just the landscape of all of that. It is a great conversation from a Montana resident about Montana and the non-resident versus resident that complexity. And they have some really good ideas on possibly how to overcome those challenges and make it a better landscape for all of us. So let's get in the conversation with Will Israel, who is the executive director of Montana Outfitters and Guides Association. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Hornady. They make some of the best, most accurate, dependable ammo on the planet. No matter if you're coyote hunting or plink and steel or hunting big game out west or even going to Africa, they make a bullet or an ammo just for you. Some of the most accurate and dependable ammo on the planet. Also, check out my podcast with Steve Hornady and learn about ammo as well as their story and some funny anecdotes from Steve. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eberly Stock. Eberly Stock is one of my favorite backpacks. Now, I've been wearing their backpack for almost 20 years. They have lightweight backpacks. They have modular backpacks, everything from their mainframe, which is just a frame pack that you can put bags on. They have these cool outside called bat wings that you can use. So check them out at eberlystock.com and make sure you tell them Ike sent you. Well, Will Israel, who is the executive director of MOGA, and MOGA is the Montana Outfitters Guides Association in Montana. And in those who listen to my podcast, heck, if you listen to any hunting podcast, you know that Montana is kind of a hotbed for the private versus public land hunter. And of course, the outfitters are involved in that significantly. And there's a lot of cool things that you guys have coming out, and a lot of things that the public doesn't know. And we'll kind of talk about a little bit of, what those clashing forces, what they're facing, and possibly some solutions. So without that, Will, thanks for coming on and, sharing some light, not only in MOGA and the Big Hearts, which we'll talk about here in a second, but also, who you are. You have a very colorful background from childhood all the way to your military career and retirement, which is always a struggle, and why you did that. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ike. You can always tell you're in the MOGA office because I got a badger's ass over my right shoulder. So there's
that representative of your constituents, or
it's just to share that we mean business.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because if you could see their butt, they're doing good work.
That's right. Yeah, I got the Constitution. I've got the Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights over my right shoulder there too. So
perfect. We'll have our moral compass then.
Yep, we're set.
Good. Well, so tell us a little bit about MOGA and you guys, what's your guys' mission statement and what you're about, and and what you're hoping to accomplish in the near future.
Mission's super simple: protect, enhance, and effectively represent the outfitting industry in all of its forms in Montana. And the way we break that down, so we have advocacy efforts, we have legislative efforts, and then business support. And there's a number of different buckets that we work with, but with the 500 members, we have about 260, 270 outfitters, world-class outfitters in Montana. We got a bunch of hunting and fishing guides as well. And then we have some affiliates and business members, world-class businesses that support the industry. Within the outfitting community, the lion's share that we have are mostly hunting outfitters and then fishing outfitters. And then there's some of these other reaches that are just fantastic. So we've got trail ride operations, horseback operations, rafting, raft fish. We've got some smaller one-each folks that take people out on backpack trips and things like that that have forest permits. So yeah, it's kind of this diverse group, really broken down into 4 areas, which is hunting, fishing, rafting, and horseback operations. And it's interesting too, is that because outfitters are smart, and they're diverse, they'll get out there and they'll provide more than one service, so if it's not just elk hunting, it's not just deer hunting, throughout the year, they might go through a fishing season that might translate into a hunting season, and then they'll go into winter hunting, shoulder seasons, predators, and then they'll get right back into the fishing season. So some of them are operating year round and they're providing all services. So it's really pretty special. And then you add the component with the Bob Marshall guys and the wilderness outfitters that they're all running horse, backcountry pack trains, backcountry trips, drop camp services, and then some folks like I went on a Big Hearts trip with Coulter Heckman of Montana Safaris. They took us on a pack trip up to Swift Reservoir in the Bob Marshall over on the east side. We went back for a week. They provided guided fishing services for us. They had camp hands. And then, it was just fantastic. So it's, I think when people, they get a little myopic where it's like, oh, it's just hunting, right? When they're thinking about outfitters, but outfitters do pretty much everything. And your typical guide has to be able to try and work year round if they can. So, if a guide can do fishing services, hunting services of all big game predators, upland bird, duck, waterfowl, you name it, they're super diverse, and then also be able to add a component of running mules and pack trains and all that good stuff. So there's I think most people, when they think about an outfitter or guide, they sort of just get focused on hunting or fishing, but these outfitters provide all kinds of services. So it's that part of it's been pretty fun. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to something that a lot of people don't think about, and I'm guilty of it as well, is just thinking outfitters and guides are all hunting or fishing. But it's really all of those things. It's the pack trips. And I had somebody tell me just recently that really an outfitter is a tour guide for some expedition that you're not familiar with or comfortable doing by yourself. And sometimes they can just be an Uber driver too, where they're just, you're coming to a new city somewhere that you've never been, and they're, navigating the complexity of getting from point A to point B, and then possibly, helping you find the restaurant that you want to go eat at, or find the hotel that you're going to stay at. So it's not, I'm trying to paint a picture that these guys aren't evil. They're not, they're not sucking up public land resources and using them for commercial use. It is really more than that. It's about taking people that normally wouldn't be comfortable or have the skill set or have the equipment into the backcountry to share and use their public land. No different than the backpacker, the DIY guy. They're just providing a surface so that they're safe, and that they have an experience with that public land or that private land, that as long as you're willing to pay for it. It's not an evil thing. That's actually called capitalism, and that's what our country is based on, and this is part of that. Let's talk about a little bit about the obviously this is a big industry in not just in Montana, but it's a big industry across the US. How does that affect your economies in Montana?
Yeah, You nailed it, Ike. So there's a legacy that's associated with a lot of these outfitter and guide businesses, and within the services they provide. A lot of these families have built these businesses from the ground up, and it's been passed from one generation to another. So it's in their DNA, it's in their blood. Or they've grabbed a ranch hand, or kid locally, or whomever, that just had that spirit of being an outfitter or guide, and they've incorporated. Some businesses were won with a game of poker, back in
Mm-hmm.
the 50s, and or built up and passed on from grandfather, son to his son, and so on and so forth, or daughter, right? Because women are very, very much a part of the industry. As a matter of fact, the best businesses are usually a husband-wife combo that just crush it, like they're in it together. So that legacy associated with the industry is powerful. Outfitters helped to build the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, and a lot of people don't know that. MOGA's history goes back to 1949 in some form or another,
Mm-hmm.
and has been incorporated since 1974. So we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. So that the legacy of this industry is long and profound, and is deeply ingrained with going all the way back to the formation of the state, back in the late 1800s. The second part of it that I like to break down is stewardship. Outfitters and guides are stewards of the land. And so when it comes to wildlife management, and when it comes to management of forests, rivers, streams, plains, out here in Montana, and Wyoming certainly translates, nobody is better connected to the health of wildlife or the land than the people who are on it every single day. So
Right.
ranchers, farmers, outfitters, guides, hunters, whether you're a DIY guy or whether you're out providing client services, you are a steward of the land. This might sound offensive, but it's generally not the folks sitting in an office like this in the cities that have a really good pulse on what's going on out there in the land. So they're stewards of the land, to include even clearing trails, up in the Bob. Right now the Forest Service doesn't have any money, and so who's going to be out there clearing those trails this year? It's going to be people that have a permitted access into that area, making sure the trail's cleared, making sure that they can get their pack trains in, and get people in there safely. So that stewardship is a big part of it too. And then lastly is public service. There are some places you just absolutely would not be able to get to in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, you name it. I mean, all across the Mountain West, without somebody who is licensed, somebody who's insured, somebody who has a professional level of training and experience and can safely get you back there, right? Like if you're living out in Chicago, New York City, LA, wherever, and you want to try to get into the China Wall,
Right.
out here in the Bob, I mean, you could do it, right? But it would take you a lot of years to figure that out, get yourself physically fit. Well, we have outfitters and guides that are taking, people that are well in their 70s and 80s into these really remote places, safely getting them in there, having this experience, whether it's hunting, whether it's fishing, whether it's camping, whatever it may be, and then bringing them back. And you want to talk about, feeling like you're in safe hands. They're like the Delta Force operators of the world, right?
Right. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
that's why I love these working with these outfitters and these guides, because I was like, oh, well, these are my people, right?
Yeah.
So, but they're just so good, and they're dedicated, and it's I have this this thought where what you do, it's not necessarily what you do because you really like it or it makes you a bunch of money. I mean, who gives a crap, right? Money comes, money goes. But it's part of God's purpose for you. I mean, like and then you become part of this tribe, right? And so it's like it's just natural, and that's what it is like for these people that provide these services. I mean, yeah, some of them make money, yeah, some of them don't, but I think half of them would probably do it for free. They love it. It is a part of who they are. So when you think about the legacy, hey, it's deeply ingrained in my family. I grew up doing this. This is what I'm going to do till I die. Right. And then when you think about, the stewardship, I love this land, and I am responsible for making sure that this land is beautiful, taken care of, and passed on to the next generation. And then lastly is that public service. There's a sense of pride that I think comes with providing, whatever you want to call it, tourist concierge services, a bunch of different terms. But there's hell of a lot of sense of pride in, going through the hard work of becoming an outfitter or a guide in the first place, because it is really tough to get there. And then being able to provide, these awesome services, like you said, it's why they gravitate towards, helping people out, helping, maybe it is being an Uber, but hopefully it's helping them get a 370 bull, and bringing that sucker home so they can put it on the wall, or seeing the China wall, or, catching that big fish, or seeing some beautiful peak somewhere in Montana. So, it's a great, it's a phenomenal industry filled with amazing people. So
you touched on a little bit on the regulations. So in Montana, every state's unique. Like Wyoming, we have, our outfitters and guides are kind of self-regulated a little bit, in the sense that we have a board, that the outfitters board, that regulates themselves. So how does it work in Montana? You said it was, you got to go through the work to get to that level. What does it take to become an outfitter and a guide?
Yeah, so there's two parts of it. You have statute. So the Montana Code Annotated has a law, or really a book of laws that are written into stone that say, this is what it takes to become an outfitter. This is what it takes to become a guide. And then there's the administrative rules, so the arms that dictate how that happens. And that's all managed through the Montana Board of Outfitters. So the MBO, probably similar to the Wyoming Board of Outfitters. To become a fishing outfitter, you need to have 120 days of service. So you have to have at least probably 3 years in the field operating as a guide. So that's number one. You have to be licensed. So you have to get that licensure through the Board of Outfitters, which is not inexpensive and not easy to get. So that goes through a review process. And then number three, you have to be able to provide operational services. So, that requires making sure that you have permits, you have the right kind of equipment, you have enough people and personnel. Generally, they look at booking strategies and all that kind of stuff to make sure you can run an efficient, effective business. So that's a fishing side. It's pretty similar on the hunting side, but if you're providing pack services, they check your horses, they check your insurance levels, they check your vehicles. I mean, it's really pretty in depth. And then we have another portion called an NCHU, net client hunting unit, that you have to have those as well. So it's when you start thinking about the barrier to entry and what it takes to actually become an outfitter in Montana, it's high, man. I mean, and then one of the things I like to bring up on occasion, a little boring, but getting a Forest Service permit or a federal permit is a gargantuan effort, and they're not making any more of them. Like, to think that any forest in Region 1 is likely going to create a new portion of a permit in a forested area. I mean, you're talking about NEPA, you're talking about environmental analysis, so what ends up happening is typically they'll have to purchase, or what they do, a transfer, which isn't the right term. It's a relinquishment and a picking up of those permits. And those are super regulated. I mean, it tells you exactly where you can go, exactly what you can do, where you can put your cat hole, where you can feed your horses. I mean, it's super, super regulated, and what you can do on forest. So when it comes to this process of becoming an outfitter, that's why a lot of it is mostly family businesses, or you work for years as a guide until you figure out the industry, you make good connections, and you work your way into it. And oh, by the way, they're not making any more forests, rivers, streams, or animals. And sometimes those habitats are shrinking. So, So there's a reason why there's only about 800 in Montana that are licensed hunting and fishing outfitters. There's a much higher number of guides, but I think the guide pool is fantastic because those guides are figuring out if they might want to take the next step and build it into a business as an outfitter. So that sort of governs the state and how it all works here in the state. And there's more to it. I don't want to bore people
to
tears with the process, but
yeah, what's your guys' role in that? You're not the regulatory arm. You're not the I mean, you're obviously an association. So what's the MOGA's function in that whole process?
So you become a MOGA member. We are your advocate directly with the Board of Outfitters. We attend every single meeting. We work Red Tape Reduction Act changes to the arms. We work on the legislative side with audits with these committees for when they want to try and change or amend or create something new. So, for example, this year we're moving a bill forward that guarantees guide qualification through an outfitter endorsement. And I don't want to it's a little complicated, but what it does, it protects the industry from anybody feeling like they can just come in and become a guide without going through an outfitter first. That outfitter endorsement is a requirement because it says, hey, we know that you've met with an outfitter, that outfitter has endorsed you. You've had all these interactions with them. You're probably working for them, and you're learning the industry underneath someone who's got 20, 30, 40 years of experience that can be a mentor for you. And it also prevents random people from coming into Montana and providing crappy services or doing things that are really against the law or unlawful. Because the way we operate in this state might have a much higher standard, might have a much more regulated process, and maybe they came from another state where it's just like, hey, you get a license, you can start running. So
it's kind of like an internship, or maybe a better way would be an apprentice. Yeah. It's an apprentice.
I think that's probably the best way to put it. And so it's just a strike of within the law that says that the Board of Outfitters could create some other means. And our driving factor is, hey, this is deeply embedded into the industry. It's been a part of it for 30, 40 years. You need to be endorsed by an outfitter to get a guide license, and that's it. So when you ask like what's our part, what's our play, it can be 10 or 15 different things, even when it comes to the Board of Outfitters. So that's a big part of it. The next part, we are very, very active with the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Commission. And so the commission meets several times per year, usually once per month. And there are season setting and fishing regulation, hunting regulation changes, and we are deeply embedded in that process. We will submit proposals for amended changes. Recently, we got the black bear season extended to June 15th. It used to shut off at the end of May, and with season fluctuations, black bear might still be hibernated, especially up in the high country, well past that May time frame. And so the problem that we saw is, the fangs out in the forest are just killing all the ungulates. It's so effective. Forest management is predator management. I mean, it really is. Like we have to be setting, good predatory management processes when it comes to mountain lions, black bear, wolves, coyotes, and all the other fangs that are out there, grizzlies, eventually here soon. And so predator management is a big part. If the predators are managed well in a region, the entire region grows, and then eventually you can have more predators, right? And so we work on those commission meetings really, really heavily, and we're deeply embedded to affect wildlife and ecosystem, regional ecosystem management. Another big one this last year, mule deer have just been smashed. You guys have probably been talking about it for years until you're blue in the face. We worked really, really hard to get antlerless deer removed from hunting in region 6 and 7, which is all the east side, on public land, and they're already starting to see the fruits of that labor. So when we're not killing does, mule deer does out on 6 and 7, then they're able to recover and start building back. Because there's a number. I mean, it's hunters, it's predators, it's CWD and other diseases. It's bad winters.
The human involvement, highways and everything else.
Highways, I don't know the number, but I would assume on the east side of the state, from Ekalaka up to Scobie, and then out to Billings and back. I mean, there's probably at least 3,000-4,000 deer killed by cars every year, maybe more. I don't know. And so, there's a lot of things out there eating them, and there's a lot of things killing them. Habitat's always a challenge. Drought's been an issue. So if we can relieve the pressure, on public lands, that's great. Let's do it. And so that's something that we worked on. So that's our work with the Board of Outfitters, the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And we also work really, really heavy with the Forest Service, BLM, and our federal partners, with permits and access and all that kind of stuff. So that takes up a big part of my workload.
So again, I mentioned this as the Uber thing, just kind of as a tongue-in-cheek joke, but if you went and had an experience with an outfitter in Montana, you went and saw the Chinese wall and it was an unbelievable experience. Is there an organization, and maybe this is you guys, and maybe it's the Board of Outfitters, that kind of keeps track of positive reviews, negative reviews, problematic things? Is there something that, are you guys doing that? If I'm just a regular Joe Schmo from Chicago, can I call you and say, hey, I'm thinking about going, or I want to go to the Frank Church and see the Chinese wall, and can you give me a recommendation of 3 or 4 outfitters? Do you guys do the review side of it too?
We don't have it on our website or reviews in-house. Our website has an aggregate search function. You can find any outfitter you want that's in our association. But so certainly we get those emails and calls every single day. And we find sometimes they're like, hey, I'm looking for this specific outfitter, and we'll find it and we'll send them their way. Or, hey, I want to get on a hunt in 2026 and do X, Y, or Z, and we'll set it out to a bigger list. But you can also do that on the website. There are some websites out there that rate outfitters and guides that I've seen. Specifically, like Archery has one, and there's a couple others. I think that kind of keeps people on. It's a good thing. I mean, you kind of take it with a grain of salt. Some people, are hard to please, I guess. But
there's always a Karen here and there.
There's a Karen
and Brad.
Brad is that they're just not going to be happy no matter what. But the other thing that I've noticed, Montana's one big small town, right? And I know Wyoming's the same way. Your reputation precedes you. If you suck, you get run out of business, man. I mean, it just, it's
back to capitalism.
It is a meritocracy, and it does self-regulate out here. I've seen it. Now you might be able to get away with that for a bit, or do advertising up and out that brings people here effectively, but you only get away with crappy service for so long. So it self-regulates.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So before we get too far down, and we'll come back to some of the hot topics that you were talking about, but let's give the audience kind of a where you came from, because you've been with MOGA just over a year.
Yeah, just over a year. Yeah.
And I know the gentleman that retired before you had been there for a really long time. But what was the attractant to you for MOGA, and where did you come from, kind of thing?
Yeah, multi-generational Montana, both sides. So born in Missoula, raised in Billings, and so I love Montana. It's my home. There's more family members here in Montana than if you swung a dead cat, you'd hit somebody that comes from my bloodline. Yeah, so it made sense to move back here. But as a young guy, I hunted, I fished, but I was looking for adventure, so I joined the military. I joined the Army in late 2000, and honestly, my options were like construction, truck driver, college, a bunch of boring stuff. No offense to anybody listening, but I was like, man, I want to get out there and jump out of airplanes and blow things up and shoot machine guns. And so that's what I did. I joined the Army. I went through a selection that's called the Ranger Indoctrination Program, and I became a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And so I stayed there for 14 years.
Wow.
So I started out as what's called an 11 Bravo, an infantryman. So my first job, I was a machine gunner. So I carried around a 240 Bravo, which is a belt-fed, fully automatic machine gun. And I called it my 30-pound necklace because that's what it was. And I walked around so we trained really hard. It's guided by a creed, standards, and I just blossomed, man. It was I always sort of felt like a round peg, square hole in life because I was motivated, energized, wanted to do more, climb the highest mountain, real active kid. And when I got there, I was like, good God, these guys are better, faster, stronger, freaking more talented. Like, I'm going to really have to work my ass off to keep up. And so I stayed there and I became a fire team leader, a squad leader, and a weapons squad leader in 2nd Ranger Battalion, and just loved it. Same platoon for 6 years. And then after that, I'd had 7 combat deployments at that point to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was like, all right, so we had some kids, wife probably needing a little bit of a break from the pressure. So I went and worked at our selection for a few years and got a degree. And my goal was to get I was working with FBI agents, HRT, hostage rescue guys, and they're like, hey, you should get a degree and come on over. And so I was thinking really heavy about becoming an HRT guy in the FBI. Well, at the time, there was a hiring freeze based on the current administration. And so I got this degree, and I'm like, well, what do I do with it? So I applied for officership for officer candidate school and got picked right up. And so went through OCS. And then after that, went through something called IBOLIC, Infantry Basic Officer Leadership Course, and went out to the 82nd Airborne Division for about 18 months. Had a blast with those guys, still jumping at airplanes, blowing things up, all the good things. And then I was feeling really strong, and I was like, well, I'm going to go back through selection. So I went back through the Ranger Assessment Selection Program and got picked up for 3rd Ranger Battalion. And then I was a platoon leader in Bravo Company, 375. And then I was an executive officer for Delta Company, 375. Around that time, so I stepped in a hole out at NTC. Really, I fell into a ditch and destroyed my knee. So got a bunch of cartilage damage. And I was like, what do I do now? So I changed my Ranger career. So I ended up taking a command position on Fort Benning, just a small little command position, running a bunch of foreign students through Ranger School and Airborne and all the trainings and stuff. And I ended up picking up a ROTC slot in Minnesota. So I went out. I was a assistant professor of military science at St. John's University in Minnesota. Had a blast with those kids. Loved them, trained them. Did a bunch of cool stuff. Went to Sandhurst, all that crap. And around this time, the COVID stuff started to hit. I'm at 20 years. I definitely don't want to take the shot, and I'm not going to take it. And I didn't want to force it on the soldiers. And so I retired. So I brought my family back home, sort of pissed off about that whole thing because I probably would have stayed for another 5-10 years. But anyways, came back home and I started working at Mark's Lumber over here in Clancy. So if you ever been to I was like, hey, I don't want to stare at a screen. I don't want to be in charge of anybody. And I just want to get reconnected in my community. So I ran a forklift. I ran a kiln. I did some distribution sales, all that crap, whatever they needed. Wouldn't let them give me a raise. I just said, hey, I just want to chill. And I just want to have a good time. Had a blast. But I started working with a veteran nonprofit, doing a bunch of training, leadership development, events, all kinds of stuff. And it was great. I volunteered for those guys full time because I had my pension, had my disability, all that kind of stuff set. And so financially we were good. And I volunteered for, almost 2 years for these guys to try and help build them up. And then we got selected for a Big Hearts trip. So I was in this same a Bible study with Mac and a good buddy of mine, Jim Weber. Mac's the former director of MOGA. And they said, hey, we want to take you on a Big Hearts trip. And I was like, oh man, like I don't deserve that. Well, and they were like, stop, you're going, you're taking your family, all that kind of stuff. And I was honestly, I'll just be dead honest, coming out all those combat deployments, 17 deployments, 5 years gone, all that kind of stuff. I was typical things, transition from the military and that kind of service, and trying to figure out this new purpose. So we go on this trip, this Big Hearts trip, and have a blast, man. And it really helped me to unplug from the noise and connect to the signal, which is, this is your family. This is your new tribe. This is, where you put your time and energy and refocus. And because I always felt like I was like looking at this snow globe, this cute little family, all these kids, this beautiful wife, doing all this good stuff. But I was like on the outside looking in. And after that trip, I felt like I was back inside the snow globe with my family. It was just a beautiful thing. So afterwards, I was like, hey, Mac, I'd like to be an ambassador. And he's like, yeah, man, let's get some coffee. So we get some coffee. And he looks at me and he starts telling me the story about how they're hiring for MOGA. And he looks at me and he goes, and you're my guy. You're my guy. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not even a very good hunter. Like, what? He's like, no, you come in, I'll teach you everything you need to know, blah, blah, blah. And, I certainly have the skills from officership and planning, special operations, really tactical, complex problem solving, blah, 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 key leader engagements, all this stuff translates. And so I came in and I was just kind of repurposed all that skill set to take care of the boys and girls of MOGA and Big Hearts, which is the icing on the cake, the heartbeat of MOGA. And so got hired by the hiring committee and haven't been fired yet. I mean, it's been a blast, man. And I wake up every day. I work as hard as I possibly can until I pass out and go to bed, and I do it again. And it's just been fantastic. I mean, it's kind of like we put our faith in God. We don't know where it takes us, right? But we burn the boats and we don't look back. That's been my process with this. And I want to apologize. I'm a man of faith, and that's the way I'm going. And this, God has allowed me to serve his purpose in the most maximum and effective way. And it's something, I never once was like, hey, I think I'll be the executive director of freaking whatever, man. I was just like, man, I am just going to move forward as hard as I can and keep crushing and put my trust, faith, hope in God. And this is where I am. So yeah. How does this stuff happen? God, that's it. I don't know any other way to put it, man. That's
so you said that Big Hearts is the heart of MOGA. Let's talk about that, because I think it's something that most people don't know outside of Montana for sure.
Yeah.
What is Big Hearts of the Big Sky, and what's its purpose? What are you guys doing, and what do you guys got coming down the pipe?
Yeah, Big Hearts Under the Big Sky. It's kind of a mouthful. It's a program that's been running for 17 years, and it's super simple. We take veterans and kids with terminal illnesses and their families on world-class outfitted trips in Montana. And so we usually take anywhere from 6 to 10 per year. So it's not a big program. It's actually relatively small compared to other programs. Our focus isn't on quantity, right? Our focus is on quality, because we select the right families that need this for that transformative process. And I'm living proof of it, where you might be in that transitional phase, or your family, you think about somebody going through this transformation after, leaving service, special operations, military, whatever it may be, or same thing, a family that's been trying to keep their kid alive in hospital for the past, 5, 6, 10, 15 years. And we bring them into Montana, and we allow Montana to heal. And that's the saying, is Montana heals. And that is if you're hunting, if you're fishing, if you are out in the woods, you don't have cell service to begin with. And so you completely unplug from all that noise, right? Or all those distractions, and you plug into that signal. It gives you an opportunity to really see what it is you need to do to heal in your life, to get your family on the right track, to take care of your child, maybe even make preparations for what's next to come and all that kind of stuff, and get reconnected. That is a healing process. We also send them out with ambassadors. So we have trained ambassadors that understand how to facilitate these things. So the ambassador picks up the family. So we cover everything from start to finish. They meet with these people, and they carry them through the whole process. So they meet them at the airport. They take care of them. They're not guiding, because we hire guides and guest ranches to facilitate all the food and the hunting and all that kind of experience. But the ambassador is with this family and just loves on them, man. Just really just loves them. And our ambassadors are definitely the right kind of people to manage that. And we just had a couple of trips this last October, and I always ask them, like, what's your biggest takeaway? Hey, what impact did this trip have you on? And I was talking to one of our participants. His name's Doc Wright, and he just stares like out into we're sitting in this beautiful overlook. He just thinks about it, and he's like, man, he goes, there was this one point where my family and I were up on this ridge line, and the sun's coming up, and he goes, it's just this beautiful sun ray. He goes, I look over, I see my family, and he goes, it's the happiest I think I've ever seen them. Smiles on their faces, my son, my beautiful wife. And then, and he goes, I'll never forget that. Well, then he goes out and smokes this big elk, right? That'll stay with him. So that bust will be on his wall. This guy's a, flight medic, which are like flight medics are kind of a step above, because they got to do everything on an aircraft that's moving around, right? And so, so he's got a lot of stuff going on from a lot of years, and death and carnage, but he'll remember that experience forever. And then that starts to create this healing process with these people. Well, it translates to a family that's been traumatized with trying to keep their kid alive in the hospitals. And so it's just this beautiful program. Doesn't have a ton of people that we take out every year, and we probably won't. We'll probably keep it under 10, because it's not about volume, it's about the individual. And every family it goes through becomes part of the Big Hearts family. So I think we've sent about 500 participants through so far with their families. We've had about another 94, 95 outfitters that have been a part of it. We're also aligned with the Arthur and Blank Foundation. They help us out quite a bit. And then also a great organization called the Tomahawk Foundation, which is ran by a number of SOF veterans over on the East Coast. Talon's Reach is another big organization that provides nominations. And those are probably our biggest. And what they help to do is make sure that we find the right people that come to each one of these trips, because we would love to take everybody out, that meets the requirements. But what we're looking for is to be able to make that transformative process. Also, I failed to mention the Billings Clinic is really big with supporting nominations for our children. So, and then usually former participants, they know what it does for a person, and they'll nominate the right kind of family looking for the services. So, but thanks for asking about, man.
This episode is sponsored by Secure, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secure It has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secure It. Today's sponsor is Forever Barnwood. Guys, we have been using this in our renovation of our building here in Powell, Wyoming, and I am here to tell you it is amazing. They are a premier supplier of barnwood across the U.S. Their products come from fresh-cut Wisconsin white pine, which has been kiln-dried way below standard lumber and hand-processed into various products like barn doors, beams, flooring, and wall covering. This type of lumber product provides all of the advantage of reclaimed barnwood at a fraction of the cost, not to mention how easy it is to work with because it's straight lumber and it doesn't have all the waste. Their barnwood products are a renewable resource and come in a variety of widths and lengths, large sizes for countertops, beams, posts, stairs, and railing systems, as well as wall covering and everything else. Their prices are only a fraction of the cost elsewhere, and they can ship anywhere you need it. With their innovative barnwood products, you'll have the right piece at the right time for your special project. So check them out at yourforeverbarnwood.com. No matter what your project is, Forever has. With their innovative barnwood products, you'll have the right piece at the right time for your special project. So check them out at foreverbarnwood.com. And no matter what your project is, Forever Barnwood has you covered.
So it's a beautiful, beautiful program.
Yeah, it is a really cool program, and we've been supporting it for a while. But what's the process if somebody from the audience is like, man, that sounds like something I want to get involved in via, I know somebody that needs some help, or via I have an outfit that could we would love to donate this experience for that. Or, all the way down to, hey, I got a couple $100 I want to dump into this, or hopefully more than that. But are you equipped and set up to do those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. We have a great website. So our Big Hearts under the bigsky.org. It's called bighearts.org. We're very active on Facebook, social media, and stuff like that. There's also a link on the MOGA website, montanaoutfitters.org. And then certainly our email contacts are on there as well. My email is director@mogamt.org. And so call us here at the office, connect with us. We have a big banquet that's coming up here in January on Saturday on the 18th. So we're selling tickets right now for that. You can come and figure out, get a little bit more connected. So I would say number one is check us out on social media, check out our website. Consider coming to the banquet on January 18th up here in Helena, the Big Hearts under the Big Sky banquet. And just reach out and get to know us. So yeah, it's love to have that support.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then same thing, if you know nominees that might be a good fit based on some of the information I just put out there, please let us know. There's some this is like spiritual metaphysical stuff that's going on here. It transcends, like our third dimension existence here in this realm. There's something deeply spiritual that connects with people, with the land and with the healing process with Montana. So, and Wyoming is the exact same way. When I say Montana, I'm speaking about Wyoming. It's the same ground, same terrain. So you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we talk about on this podcast constantly is why do you hunt? And one of the overarching, almost every single time, somebody will answer with a version of, I'm reconnecting with my roots. I'm reconnecting with nature. I'm getting away from the hustle and bustle. I'm getting away from, the cell phone and the constant busyness or the screen time. I'm reconnecting with people, with my family, my friends, new acquaintances. And this is no different than that. I've never looked at it though until today, the healing process, that it's so powerful that you can take somebody that has some really some traumatic experiences in their life via, if it's a terminal kid, or if it's, PTSD or whatever, the connection and the healing that can happen there. That is so cool that you guys are doing that, and that it's working. You're seeing benefits enough to the big names. I mean, you name some big names there that are donating and making sure that it happens because it's working. That's very, very cool. You said that's in Helena, Montana, January 18th. Is that what you said?
Yep. We're at the Delta Marriott Hotel in Helena, Montana. So doors open at 4:30. One of the cool,
and anybody's invited.
Anybody's invited. Yeah. So one of the cool, I want to share a part of this program. Capitol High School is here locally, and the director for their machine and welding shop, his name is Jim Weber. They've been supporting now for 14 years. And so they have incorporated the giving side, the charitable side of Big Hearts into their program. So these kids, we just had a breakfast with them this morning. These kids make these amazing creations. So fire pits, headache rack, they'll make bumpers, they make individual pieces of art. They'll make anything that you can make in a machine and welding shop. And then those items are auctioned off every year. And then as a part of his program, they go out and they get donations, steel, different materials that create these things. And then it usually equates to some kind of a career. So we've had kids that have gone through Jim Weber's welding and machining class that are working at Defiance right now.
Really?
They're making actions for guns. They're working at Proof Research, right? Making barrels. So like Big Hearts is actually helping to build certain parts of like the hunting, fishing, outdoor recreation industry. I mean, it's just this.
Wow.
It's just this amazing thing, right? And I'm not talking about hundreds of thousands, but
it's very Montana though. It's grassroots.
It's hard to really wrap your mind around it. It's like throwing that pebble into a calm pond. You don't know but it just ripples out and it affects everything. And that's what, these charitable organizations have the capacity to do.
Yeah.
Not all of them are good at doing that. And that's all Mac Menard, man. Mac poured and the board, the people who designed this program and have nurtured it and loved it and grown it to where it is. So really, really big responsibility on my shoulders to not only maintain what we have, sustain, but also, add the components to it to continue to keep her going for years and years to come. So, but anyways, we will. We have a great young gal named Krista Holcomb. Her husband was a pilot in the Montana Guard. His name is Chris Holcomb. They ran a nonprofit called Whitetail Ranch for a lot of years. So she's come on board. So Krista's going to be our program manager. She's got a huge heart. Her talent level is limitless. So yeah, Big Hearts is going to do phenomenal for many, many years to come. So
that's great. So let's get back to a little bit. You kind of glassed over this a little bit, or glazed over this a little bit about, you grew up in Billings. You've hunted your whole life. Is this a family thing? Did you hunt with your dad, uncles? I mean, how did that all start?
Yeah, I grew up hunting with my grandfathers, both sides. So my grandfathers lived in Missoula. Both of them lived in Missoula. So we did quite a bit of hunting around the west side of the state and sort of the northeast, mostly deer, a little bit of elk, and a lot of birds. We did a lot of upland bird, which is my favorite thing to hunt. And so that was a big part of it. And then actually my mom, like the first deer I killed was on a hunt with my mother. And so
Cool.
my mom is great. Tons of fishing. We did a lot more lake fishing. My grandfather had a pontoon boat that was like his pride and joy, and the other one had just a regular, sort of a fishing boat and jet boat. So I didn't do a ton of fly fishing until really recently, but we caught more trout and more walleye and more silvers than I could ever, even want to think about. We would troll for hours and hours. It was great. But and perch and everything. We hunted, or we fished a lot at Holter Lake, up in the gates of the mountain, and just love it. We go out there and stay for weeks on end and just have a blast as kids. But yeah, hunting, was a big part. It sort of died off when I joined the military. I only had enough time to do certain hobbies. And so I'm a little ashamed to say, but I really didn't hunt a whole lot outside of a handful of times, because I would either miss a season, or I would, I couldn't justify, taking a week off or 2 weeks, whatever it may be, away from the family after I've been gone for, and so I just kind of let it, I just pushed it aside, just didn't do a whole lot of it. So really, it's just been the last 3 years since I've retired that I've started getting back into it. But now I have a 14-year-old son, and my God, like he is my buddy. Like, you shouldn't say your kid's your best friend. He is absolutely my best friend. Like he is my brother. Don't tell him, because he'll get away with stuff he shouldn't. But I spend more time with that dude out in the woods than anybody else, and it is a blast. He loves it. I love it. We got his first buck this year. We killed a bunch of birds. We had an absolute blast. We got a turkey. It was just this banner year. We're working towards getting him an elk. It's become such an ingrained part of he and I's relationship. And then my other siblings, I have a ton of brothers, and they have got a bunch of nephews, and we just get out there, and it's become this amazing part of a family culture. And I want to establish that as a tradition for those dudes for the rest of their days too, because it's a beautiful thing, man. So I didn't hunt a ton as a kid. I did quite a bit, probably not as much as the rest of you guys, but yeah,
So
I absolutely love it.
So you grew up doing that, then went to the military, and through your military, because you have an interesting story of how you got in it, why you got in it, and as well as why and how you got out of it, and that you're kind of disappointed that it happened that way. What would you do, or what would you say to let's say my 18-year-old son? What would you say to him as advice if he goes, I'm really thinking about going to the Army? What do you have some wisdom there on how to do it, and things to keep from doing, and things that make sure you do?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. And I had this conversation yesterday. There's not a lot of things for young men in particular that equate to a rite of passage. Graduating high school, everybody graduates or gets their GED, whatever. College, getting your degree is probably one of them, rite of passage, or trade school, right? Something like that. But the military certainly is. And I think that's what a lot of young people are looking for. I want to test who I am. I want to see what I'm made of. I want to serve my country and be like dad or grandpa or my uncle, whatever. And then they make that decision. I think it's wonderful, and I think our country is worth fighting for, and I think that America is worth it. People used to say thank you for your service. And I was like, man, I didn't feel good about that because I was just having a blast with my buddies, banging steel and blowing things up. And, I won't go into the rest of it, but having a really good time. And so I started saying America is worth it, because that's how I feel. And so a young person who's considering joining the military, really sit down and analyze what it is that you want to do. There's some services that are a little bit harder on the body and a little bit tougher on the soul. But like, think about the Marine Corps. You don't have to ask a Marine what they are. A Marine is a Marine. The esprit de corps in the Marine Corps is phenomenal. Best in the biz, great uniforms, awesome. But tough way of life. Not gonna lie, you're gonna suffer and suck immensely as a Marine. Army, you become a soldier, and you can go my route, the Ranger thing. But there's also 25 other MOSs that you can get that equate to some kind of a job. You also have the Guard. You have your state National Guard. Air Force, phenomenal, very smart people. Kind of more of a nice, I would encourage more of my daughters, to somebody's going to take offense to this, but if my daughters want to join the military, I'd be like, Air Force or Navy. Those are your two options, and that is it, because I don't want you coming back abused anyway. But no, I'm kidding. But Air Force, great way to go. And then Navy as well. And then also, hey, if you can align this with a degree, if you'd like to get, your college degree knocked out with this, consider ROTC. Consider going through 4 years of ROTC and commissioning as an officer. And then you start life with such a distinct advantage. The skills training, the education, the experience, the knowledge and wisdom. I mean, you come out a different person from the military. Whereas, maybe you get there, maybe you don't between the age of 20 and 30, but you're a different person in a good way, right? Like sometimes it's, we see all these war movies and it's just hell, and guy comes out and he's shell shocked, PTSD and all that crap. That's not the case. That for people who chose, though, like I chose that path. Like I chose to do the hardest, most difficult, most kinetic special operations, route that I possibly could find. I wanted that. But that's a very small minority of people that are in the entirety of what you could call SOCOM. I mean, you're talking very small numbers. The if you were to add the Guard and conventional force together, gosh, you're looking at 1.5 million. You're talking less than 1%, maybe 2% are on that, cool guy side of the house. That's what I wanted. So, and they're very kinetic and all that kind of good stuff. There's so many different venues, opportunities, college paid for. I highly encourage it, and especially now in the political climate, as things are the winds are starting to change, I think in the right way, very much so. I would heavily encourage it. And if you end up going over to combat, we just called that, okay, well, we were practicing and now we get to go to the game. So, so that was, that was my thing. But, there's a lot of people there around this world that depend on America to keep them safe, and keep them protected, because they, for America is really, really good at taking care of our partners and our allies. We've been protecting South Korea since the 50s. I've done 2 trips to Korea. The threat is real there. Same thing, between Europe and the Eastern Front over there. We've been helping to protect Europe for many, many decades, and other parts around the world. So, and our nation and the waterways, international waterways with our Navy and the airway, and airways, sorry, and the skies, and then now space, right? So when you talk about cyber threats that are coming in from China and Russia and other nefarious, shitty countries. And, we need good people to make those, make that decision to serve and to do a really good job with it. So yeah, I encourage it. You really got nothing to lose. What the hell else you doing between 20 and 24, bro? Get out there. Go
that's
get
right.
it.
Grow up fast, and
do
grow
it.
up the right way.
Yep.
Well, Will, as always, it's fun to talk to you, and you got a lot going on. There's a couple topics that you and I talked about that you wanted to hit that MOGA is facing right now, and that's the resident versus non-resident access. What did you mean by that? I mean, I think we all kind of understand what it is, but your boots on the ground. Give us the guys that aren't living in Montana, and we're living our own version of non-resident versus resident. What's going on up there?
Yeah, there's a I guess a general problem statement is Montanans see and feel like public lands are being overpopulated, in some places overrun by out-of-staters coming here to hunt and fish and camp. And it's become a pretty, what I would call, pretty substantial issue. The number one issue in Montana is probably property taxes. There's some things going on there the governor's going to be working through. But probably number two statewide is this big issue. And it's two-part. There's also lower numbers of mule deer. And so there's only so many places you can go and hunt to fish. And so now somebody can pull up a map, proprietary, they can figure out exactly where to go. And so, these old timers and people that have been hunting and fishing in certain areas, all of a sudden, they're like, how in the heck did this person get back here? And then they're staying for weeks on end, and their hunting ethic isn't maybe quite what it should be, like, hey, we paid a bunch of money, we're coming here and we're going to stay here and mess up your set and try and get whatever we can before we take off. And so it's created this us versus them that is really substantial. And I don't know, is it similar in Wyoming, or are there similar kinds of
Yep. The access, not as far as being access points, but I'm just saying access to information and gear and the ability to stay out there longer and find these, these gyms, these holes in the wall to recreate is never been so easy. Never been so easy.
Yeah. And so res versus non-res is probably not the right way. It's in-state versus people coming from, and it's the same thing. I'm saying the same thing. But that's going to become a legislative issue. Now, where that's a problem for outfitters is the majority of clients come from out of state. And so it's about an 80-20 mix, of clients that are coming from another state. But the message that we're sharing, and it's really starting to resonate, is outfitters empower Montana's economy and enhance rural communities. So there's this really big dispersion. Outfitters and guides are not competing with the public on public land. And so, and the legislators are starting to really understand that. And so the conversations that I'm having are pretty positive. So if they're like, hey, we want to work on this problem and we have this idea, what they're sharing with us is, we also want to create an exception for outfitters and guides. And I'm like, yes, thank you. And because nobody wants to hear how much money, but it is substantial. I mean, as far as like the tourist industry in Montana, outfitters are like 10 to 12% annual of the income. So it's this $500 million plus industry in Montana. Well, those are small businesses with, some of them 100 plus employees. There's a business up in Glacier that has 140 employees that they hire every single year. That's crazy. On top of like 30 full-time staff. Well, that's gas, food, lodging in those. You're talking about, in some small towns around the state, Choteau, all these other small towns around the state, that potentially have upwards of tens of thousands of people that subsist off of, non-residents that are coming here. So if there is some form of a change legislatively, commission wise, that they want to work out to alleviate the pressure, the message is resonating. Hey, protect this great industry that has this legacy stewardship public service, that is not competing with you in any way. You're not out there seeing an outfitter because that outfitter is utilizing public land way far in the back. They're 12 miles back. You're not going to see them, or they're on private, right? So they've secured leases through really hard work and a lot of money to provide those services. You're competing with somebody coming here from somewhere else. And I want to be careful there too. I don't want to just bag on non-residents. That's not my mission here. It's a sensitive subject, right? People have, it's public land, and it's owned by the feds. There's 27 million acres of it in Montana, and then there's also these BMAs, another, 6 to 7 million depending on the year, that people have access to in Montana and outside of Montana. So that's everybody has, that right. But there's ways that they can manage it without turning the faucet all the way off and screwing the industry. These are, and I take that job very seriously. There's a difference between a nonprofit, and a trade association. We have skin in the game, right? And this might sound offensive. I love them. I work with a ton of them, right? But if their mission fails, like, nobody loses their job, right? If we are not successful, Rod Paschke might not be able to serve clients.
Right.
I take that pretty freaking seriously, man.
Right.
And stock growers, Farm Bureau.
Well, that's a 10% hole in your guys' economy.
Foam. Like the associations that affect Montana small business, we have skin in the game, period. Yeah. And protect them, love them. I mean, understand, think about how your, legislative thing that you want to get through, how that impacts, hundreds of businesses, thousands of workers, and tens of thousands of people in a negative way. Yeah. And there's not a lot of growth. Like, this industry is really pretty static, and it has been for probably 20 years, right?
Well, they're not growing more property.
They're not growing more property. There's only so many, rivers and streams. There's only so many, fish, deer, elk, ungulates, so on and so forth. And, really it's very stable. It's very consistent. Take care of them, help them out, help their businesses to thrive. Yeah. Don't try and hurt them because your constituents are pissed off about, too many people hunting and fishing in your area. It's typically not going to be an outfitter guide. Fishing is a little bit different in some parts of the state. You have the Missouri, you have the Madison, you got the Big Hole, you got a couple of really highly, utilized
high profile
rivers,
yeah,
in Montana. But most of those guides and outfitters know where to go to relieve pressure and not be too much of a burden on the locals and still provide client services. So they're responsible with that stuff because they don't want to mess up somebody's fishing hole while they're out there fishing, all that kind of stuff. So
would you say the hunters and anglers in Montana, the number of them are increasing, or is it the same amount of people doing it more often, or they're spending more time out there?
Yeah, it's definitely increased, but I would say the increase isn't necessarily from out of staters or non-residents. I think those numbers, if you look at tag sales throughout the last 10 years, it's remained pretty stable. It actually has. So, there's a mix of two things going on. We already talked about technology. They're getting access to areas that they probably didn't before. So people are, their honey hole is now being used by somebody else. And then there's been a lot more people that have moved into state over the past 10 years, 20 years. The state's population has increased by about 400,000 people, and give or take. And so, and who's to say that
those are 400,000 people that move there to recreate, because it's not like 400,000 people move there to work for Amazon.
Who's to say that all of them didn't come there? I'd say a high percentage, at least 70-80%. And so, they may have not changed their license plate yet, as they got out there, right? So you might be seeing somebody that is your neighbor.
Right.
Majority of them are coming from neighboring states, and I don't want to bash on those guys, but because we love Wyoming, but they're not coming from Wyoming.
No.
They're coming from east and west.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, I think a lot of it is in state pressure as well. Folks have moved here, and they moved here for a purpose, to get out and recreate. So, and then because the numbers just don't prove out an increase specifically during hunting season. The department only issues so many tags, and that hasn't really changed in 10, 15 years. Like it's the same number of tags.
We talk about that in our organization all the time. Of course, we have the TagHub in the East, the Eastmans members research section in the back of the magazine. And, you look at the number of tags, and I'll just take one of our general areas. It's a really high profile area. It's over the counter for residents. It's 7 points to draw as a non-resident. Those tag numbers haven't changed. In fact, they've gone down over the last 10 years, but everybody's complaining about hunting pressure. And I'm convinced, back to what I said before, the gear and the time and the passion has increased to the point where these guys used to spend 3 days out there hunting. Now they're spending 2 weeks out there, which just increases the pressure on the landscape. I think it's a similar thing in Montana. Of course, you guys got an influx of people, but you're also influx of people, plus people are spending more time out there. So it compounds the amount of people you're running into constantly. And there's no more honey holes, because there's the ability to get on a mapping software and find every public land chunk in the country. And, let's see if I can get in there. Yep, I can get in there, and come to find out that family's been in there hunting for 2 generations, and now you're brand new to it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I mean, it's not hard to put the puzzles together. It's like, let's see, elk like to be cool, right? So they don't want to be hot, so they're going to be up higher. They need water. They need food. Yep. They don't like going where predators are at. So yeah, I mean, like if you look at a hunting district on an overhead map, you can be like, oh, okay, well, I think they're right here, here, and here, and probably whereas it might have taken the local 20, 30 years to figure that out and know where they move and all that kind of good stuff. So
right.
Yeah, and that's, people aren't dumb. They figure this stuff out. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, they're not issuing, because all tags are based on their annual surveys. So, and they ebb and flow. So they have a range, but it never gets over a certain amount, and it typically doesn't get under a certain amount. It's usually there in the middle. Like, okay, we spotted this number of deer, elk, and antelope in these areas. So this is the number of tags we're going to issue for that area, unless it's tied to a specific district at a number that's set in stone. And even those have a range, but it doesn't fluctuate. So the department is not issuing out more tags. They're not. No. It's the same number. So, people are just, like you said, they have the ability to get into other areas. They're staying longer. Remote work, you could theoretically go out and hunt for a month and park your camper, and still work 40 hours a week, dude. So all those are different components that are changing the landscape, and people are pissed off about it.
So let's talk about family. You've got a 14-year-old son. I know you mentioned daughters, so you've got daughters. What's in store for them? What's the landscape of Montana going to look like when they're your age? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm an optimist, also a realist for sure. I think there are so many good people in this state that are so dedicated to ensuring that the next generation is handed something better, that we will work as a state and as leaders and as a team to ensure that not only they have a better product, but they have a better process for management. And so that is my honest thought as I'm putting this thought together. 'Cause that's a good question.
Yeah.
But that is my thought.
So what if you had the ability to do a TED Talk, Will, what would you do it on?
What would I do a TED Talk on?
Obviously, a TED Talk's an 18-minute or less
Yeah.
conversation something you're passionate about. You don't have to be the leading expert on it, but something you're passionate about that you want to share with other people.
I don't know. Finding truth and meaning through your relationship with God.
Truth and meaning through a relationship with God. What define that a little bit more for us?
I think your relationship with God is the most important thing that you can develop in your life, and that is the only way that you can understand reality, which is through understanding truth, and from truth, finding through that process is the most important thing. Yeah, that's my answer.
That's pretty deep. That's really deep, actually. I would come listen to that TED Talk. If you ever put that on, you let me know.
Yeah, I don't think they'd let me.
Well, they'd let you. It just wouldn't be at the TED. Oh, I bet they would. I'll bet they would. I've seen them. I've seen
would.
very spiritual ones on there.
Yeah, maybe they would. Yeah, I wake up every morning, I pray, and I have God's Spirit with me to help lead and guide me, and it brings me a lot of truth and meaning every day. So cool. If I could help other people come to understand that through the example of Jesus Christ, I think that would be. What's more important than that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very insightful. Well, I appreciate your time and your insight, and it was awesome to hear, boots on the ground, what's going on up there, because what's happening in Montana is just a snippet of what's happening in other states. And maybe, you could probably argue that Colorado is ahead of where Montana is as far as number of people coming in and the number of recreating and number of tag sales and the management problems that they're having with wildlife and outfitters and all that stuff. Obviously, they defeated that bill to take cat hunting off the huntable species. But unfortunately, like I said, there was still 1 million people that wanted to do it. That's still scary. That just means they haven't accomplished it yet, but they're going to keep trying. And that's happening, all the states. It'll be Montana next. I mean, maybe not right next, but Montana's on that line. Wyoming's on that line. It's going to happen. And so staying informed and people like you, boots on the ground, doing stuff and working with legislators and working with, Fish and Game, that's key, and we appreciate that. And obviously your big hearts. I have a place in my heart for the big hearts, because I think it's a really, really cool thing you guys do. Obviously you would love to figure out how to do it, instead of 10 to 100 of them, but I understand that you start doing that and it starts to get convoluted and starts to get messy, and 10 is a really good number. So thanks for doing all that.
Hey, thank you, Ike. And I just want to say, I haven't known you very long, nor have I known Eastman's Publishing very long. But what I have come to know is the things that we're talking about, I know is in your DNA through your father, through your family's lineage. and through the work that you guys do, I have a tremendous amount of respect and trust in Eastmans, I guess is probably the best way to put it, and the work that you guys do to protect hunters' rights, to protect land rights, to protect businesses, and to not only protect but also support and sustain. I'm very impressed with the work that you guys do, and do it very, very well. It's an honor to be asked to be a part of this, and so thank you, and just keep crushing, man.
Yep.
You guys are doing phenomenal. So thank you guys very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. And Big Hearts of the Big Sky. Check them out. Check out MOGA, Montana Outfitter Guys Association. Will's doing a great job up there. And if you have questions about an outfitter, if you're more interested in that, more interested in donations, or attending their banquet here coming up in January, make sure you get on board. So thank you very much.
Rangers lead the way. See you, buddy.
See you, man.
Yep.